Hello, everyone. My name is Paradise, and I welcome you again to another episode of the Sustainability Squad. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Ebere, with whom I'll be discussing our topic today, which is the history of development as a third sector in Nigeria. Hello, Ebere. How are you doing?
Hi, Paradise. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm doing all right. I'm fine, thank
Thank you
you.
so
How are
much.
you?
I'm very well, thank you. Ebere will be giving us like an overview of what we'll be looking at today. And then, yeah, she'll ask me some questions, and I think I would ask as well. And just like we're just going to be chatting generally about the topic. And yeah, good to have you. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, it's a pleasure to be joining you on the sustainability squad. Um, once more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so today we're talking about the history of development as a sector. And first of all, I think it's nice if we understand the context, if we give context to our conversation. So development as a sector talking with regards to community development here, right? And what exactly is community development? What is development? Community development is basically a process of people coming together to make things work, to
Yeah.
solve social problems in their community, in their nation, in their families, or wherever they find themselves. Yeah, so problems ranging from ensuring social justice, environmental conservation, gender equality, education, quality education, and what have you. Whatever the problem might be for the community, just people coming together to ensure that these problems are solved and people are able to live better lives, lives that have good quality, you know. Yeah, so and sorry, I keep moving my eyes. I have my notepad, and that's where I'm looking at. Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about the pre-colonial, what the development sector in quotes used to be pre-colonial season, right? So it wasn't exactly a sector at that time. It was
Mm.
more of a way of life of the people, right? So
Exactly.
people had age grade, they had women groups who sometimes deployed advocacy, try to speak to the rural leader or the community chief about one thing that was not favorable to a certain group, or the other. People came out to speak up. We had women who fought for other women. For instance, I remember one of my cousins, sharing how her grandmother would always get reports from women that were experiencing gender-based violence. So if your
Mm.
husband beats you, you just need to come
Good
and
to
find
have.
her grandmother. Her grandmother used to wear, this napkin we used to wear kids when they were
Yeah.
babies. So her grandmother had her own, right?
And
So she doesn't
I
tie her
think
star
that's
or what
what
have
it's
you. So
called. And
yeah, she just put that napkin thing, tie it, and then carry her staff. Again, she gets the man, she will beat the hell out of you, and you will not try it again. That was social justice. Fighting for women, and we also had age grades that taught men how to be men, how to behave responsibly. We had community farmlands where people had to farm together to provide for everybody to ensure. And this thing is also impacted on the economic situation of the time because people were not hungry, people were not poor. So the economy was, good,
yeah.
and we had people who took care of the elderly. We had people who came together to clean the environment. I think that's where we still get this our clean up,
Yeah.
Saturday clean up.
I
We still
I I
have
even
where
witnessed that in my village.
yeah. So people come together to clear grasses, to build bridges that have been broken during the rainy season. In fact, I think there's this in my I think one of my cousins also told me she's older, so she experienced these things, and she told me that at that time, if you have any household that maybe their house, it was mud house, thatch house they use it. If their house collapsed during the rainy season, the whole community will have to come together to build for them. You don't pay anybody anything. So they come together, they dig, they get the mud, they mold the blocks, the women go to fetch water, the men do, everybody just all hands on deck. And then give it a week, you already have a new house to move into. So these were some of the ways um community development was thriving during the pre-colonial season. Yeah, so people did it voluntarily. You're not mandated to do anything. We also had even punishment, right?
Yeah.
Justice as well. People you can be ostracized, you can be excommunicated if you committed certain taboo or abomination. Maybe you murdered somebody, or you cheated somebody, maybe you molested a child, or things like that. You could be excommunicated, you could be ostracized from the community permanently. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that was community development to what in pre-colonial season, what they understood and how they were able to keep up, to just maintain peace, law and order, and to ensure that people were comfortable living together in the community. Then during the colonial season, right, when the colonial masters started coming in, started having they came development during that period came through the missionaries, right?
Mm.
So missionaries came in, and although allegedly, I don't know because I wasn't there, the missionaries' objective was to advance the agenda of the colonial master, right? So through schools or through the hospitals and what have you. But while they were doing that, they were also helping the community, providing education to people, adults, literacy, education, better health care opportunities, infrastructure, industrialization, or even though, the research work that I looked at was trying to, suggest that these industrialization and opportunities and what have you were set up by colonial masters to enhance their the
Yeah, trade,
extraction
yes,
of minerals and
exploitation, yes. Because if
thank you, the exploitation.
not to cut it short, if you look at the railways that were built from where cocoa, whatever material they were looking for in each state, were produced and
For
straight
easy
to the
transportation
shores
now. Yeah,
where they were shipped off, you know. And
yeah,
so infrastructure that were put in place at that time to facilitate their trade, which in another word,
yeah,
their exploitation or exploration of the resources in Nigeria or
yeah,
any other country where they, yeah, please
yeah.
go
So
ahead.
yeah, that was the colonial. Yeah, so it's fine. So that was the colonial period. Those were development in quotes. They were trying to help us, trying to help us to show us the light.
Yeah,
But even though they had their own agenda, but that's that. And then from independence now, right? Our people, our government, the independence from the independence, that is from the 1960s
1960.
now, the government and yeah, even I think even before the independence, during the military regime. Now, I'm not a very good student of history, but I don't know if the military regime was it before independence or
It
after the
was it
independence.
was after independence. Independence in
Oh,
1960.
okay.
The first coup was in 1966 by Kaduna and Zogu.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay, yeah. So the military and the civilian government also tried to also introduce some development um,
Initiatives.
project
Yeah.
initiatives, right, for to help better the lives of the quality of life of Nigerians. I think the one that I will never ever forget. I think that was Obasanjo, the Operation Feed the Nation, right? So
And
all those
Buhari's
projects, the
first regime, kick against indiscipline, Kai.
yeah, yeah, the agri development project, the low cost housing, the banking schemes, rural electrification projects, the
Yeah.
poverty alleviation and rural community development, all those projects every government that came into power had something they wanted to achieve. They had projects. I think, good luck, Jonathan. I'm trying to remember. There was this very popular project he did, raising where he was raising entrepreneurs. I can't remember
It
it now,
was
right? So, but
Shopee. Shopee.
what?
Shopee.
It wasn't even Shopee. I think it was Shopee. Not even Shopee. There's another. I know Shopee. There's another one. I'm trying to remember it now, but I mean, those were all projects, initiatives that
The
the
brain.
government and both military and the civilian government had different projects, right? So, and not just the presidents or the governors and what have you now, even the wife of the governors as well. You know, they always have their pet project, and every single one of them is always directed towards community development. However, one of the downside of government projects is that every government wants to pioneer or wants to be the originator of their own project. Nobody is continuing what the other
Mm.
person,
Lack of
had already
continuity.
started. So you now find that, you now find that no, you don't they don't implement conclusively, right? So you start a particular project in the community for agriculture, for
Yeah.
instance, and then somebody else comes in. Instead of continuing that project to see to the end of it, you now go and introduce road network projects or water supply projects, or something else that is entirely different from what the other person was already doing. And this is one of the downside with government um projects
Yeah.
towards community development. Yeah, so I'm going to now to continue to now talk about how we now started having how we started having NGOs and CSOs, individuals just coming up and trying to provide solution for community problems.
One that was really paramount was the Civil War. That was when people began to see the gap, the pain, the lack in our society, and individuals, international organizations and entities, international governments began to like intervene. And the oil, what is it called? And people began to intervene, sorry. And for instance, let's take the Civil War, for instance. That was when Doctors Without Borders were formed after some doctors came under Red Cross to Nigeria, and they were stopped from treating certain group of people. And as doctors, you are under oath to treat people who are hurt. And for some reason, these people were stopped from treating groups of people, particularly from the southeastern Nigeria due to the war. The story has it they had to go back to Europe, resigned, came together, and that's how they formed Médecins Sans Frontières, present day Doctors Without Borders. So another one we can also look at was shortly after independence, the United States sent out grants to Nigeria to help build agricultural colleges, 4 agricultural colleges, just to help fast track and improve the agricultural products that these schools and the country was coming up with. So this is just like basically how these things began to form as we currently know them. And down the line, I would say it also started from activism, people seeing the gaps that we got along the line from governments who come to promise, oh, agricultural produce, there will be no hunger, there will be no this, there will be no that, and people were hungry. Companies were shutting down, especially after the oil boom, when we left our food production and other things we did to focus on crude oil. So focusing on crude oil destroyed our economy in a very large sense, because instead of having diverse economy, drawing resources from different parts, from food production, from rubber, from cocoa, from oil, that's palm, we now focused on crude oil. And that created that gap. The economy began to go down and people began to scream about it. People began to you know, began to like make the documentaries to talk about the challenges. Some of the documentaries we've seen lately from Onyeka Onwenu. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It came out recently, a few years ago before she passed. A documentary she did on Nigerian economy in the 70s. Another person that also spoke to power was Fela. Fela, through his music, he kept, advocating. And from the groups began to form women group, youth for this, women for that, and community organizations began to form to like challenge the government to do this, to do that. So Nigeria got her independence in 1960, October of 1960. And shortly after independence, right about 6 years into it, we had our first military coup led by Major General Kaduna Nzogo. And that was the coup that a lot of people till today still call the Igbo coup. I don't know why that is. Maybe because he was an Igbo man. But after that coup, a number of other coups happened until 1967 when the Biafran War started. And during the Biafran War, people died, children had kwashiorkor. The site with some of the documentaries you would have seen was really gory. And international government had to like step in. Multilateral organizations also stepped in to help. But now the thing is, they were supporting the government to stop whatever crisis or issue we had. And story has it that some of the doctors that attended, that came to Nigeria during the war under Red Cross were stopped by the Nigerian army from helping Biafran armies and some community members that were wounded, and they just couldn't stomach it. So they had to leave. They went back to Europe. Eventually, they came back, and that's how the current Doctors Without Border, the Médecins Sans Frontières we have today, was formed. And they came back to help people in Eastern Nigeria during the war. Again, as this war raged, and by the time it came to an end, we still had like military rule, government top coming up, and the political instability due to this military rule led multilateral organizations like the UN and the rest of them to leave Nigeria. And what they then did is instead of funding development projects through the government, they now have to set up networks through which they funded community development initiatives. And that was how like things we know today as CSOs or NGOs were born. And fast forward to 1992, which by the way was still under a military rule, we formed the Nigerian network of NGOs, and this was just simply to coordinate the affairs of NGOs with multilateral organizations as well as the government. And they were there to help make sure that things run smoothly as a network. But that's just how NGOs came to be, from one to another to another to another. And again, when people, community members, ordinary people began to see that things were falling short within the community, they began to come up with groups, ways to sort this out, set up groups to help with education, groups to help with health, groups to help with equality, rights for women, and so on and so forth. So that's just basically how we came to have what we have today as network of NGOs or group of NGOs now identified and recognized as the third sector, not just in Nigeria, but globally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, talking about the history of how the non-profit sector came to be and the development as a sector, and how continued it progressed until we got to solve problems in their communities.
If I could share what?
Could you share, could you share how how did you start your non-profit organization? What
My
led?
non-profit organization.
Yes. What led you
An ambush.
to start? Yeah, because let's use you as a case study now, because we talked about how different people decided to solve different problems in their community, various different areas, trying to combat hunger, or trying to solve the problem of lack of water or education and what have you. So how did you decide to, what made you, when, how, what made you to decide to take this bull by
Yes.
the horn and go
Mm.
into the development sector?
Wow. Okay. First of all, I never thought I would own like a charity organization or an NGO. I've always wanted to work for the UN. I've always wanted to work for the UN. I like the idea of helping people or helping solve a problem. That is what I've always wanted to do. And then I remembered growing up, I grew up in the village, by the way. However, we schooled in town. My village is not like very far from Abakaliki town. So my nursery school was around the village. And then primary school, we went to a Catholic school in town. And until my primary three, my dad had to move us to my village school, my community school. And that was where I saw the difference. When you live in a place, you think it's the way of life until you've seen something different. If you've not had what you've not had, you will not long for. So my nursery school, whatever we did and we came back to the village, everything was normal. It was the normal life I had. But I never went to a public school in my village because the nursery school I even attended was owned by the Catholic Church, although in my community. And it was good. It was one of the best we had around. And in primary three, we went back to my village primary school. I was in primary three. My sister was in primary two. So we all went back. First term, all of us came first in our class. Second term, first. Third term, first. It's not like we didn't deserve it. We were intelligent. We are intelligent. But the thing is, I saw the difference. And our average was so different from what other children had. And that is because we had some kind of education that they did not have access to, which was what we got from the Catholic school we went to in town. And in that classroom was full of dust. The floor was dust. There was no plastering, there was nothing on the floor. It was just dust. And we didn't have normal desks. And to get your seats, we would come to school with a machete, go into the bush and cut wood. Get a wood that has like a Y shape. You get four of those, you keep this one and this one, you keep like two facing each other, and then you get a long stick, two of those, place them in between the two Ys, and then put a plank. If you can't find a plank, you get like a bigger stick and put it across, and that is what we sat on. And the person in front of you will bend and their back will be your desk. I experienced that. But that is also the story of a lot of other children in my community. And I'm going to be honest with you, by the time I had this experience, I didn't think anything of it. I was a child. I was about 9, 10 years old. I didn't think anything of it. It was interesting because teachers I don't think they were supervised or monitored because they all had like farms in my school, in that school. Before break, it's time to do agricultural practice. That is what they called it, teacher's farm work. You would go into your teacher's farm and labor. You do the clearing, you do the planting. When it's time to harvest, you do the harvesting. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you were going to be part of it. What they planted in the farm, we brought. Like, I will say this because we were taught in my dialect. We were in school, but we were being taught, you will be taught English and maths in my dialect. It facilitated learning in a way, but it also did not give us room to explore other things. Now, while we were, by the end of school day, every day you hear, Onye drage kele, Nugdegono Oshako, Nugdegono Oma, Ebronwani, Igudoma, Ibrunwoke, a parogo. So what does that mean? Each and every one of you, while coming tomorrow, what do you bring? Cassava sticks, obviously for planting in their farms. If you're a woman, you come with cutlass. If you're a man, you come with a hoe. And these were children in primary school. We were kids.
A man, I mean a boy. If you're a boy,
Yeah, if you're a
you
boy,
come
you
with
bring hoe, and if you're a girl, you bring a cutlass. That was, yeah, and it seemed normal to me because it was a bit abnormal from what we have, but I was a child, I didn't pay attention to it. After then, my dad was like, our white brocade days were over there. So we moved back to the Catholic school we were in town, and life went on. Fast forward to university, I realized that most of the people that were in my class did not go past that primary school. Like, you know how you go back to the village to visit family members, and you see these children that were my age mates in my class were all mothers already. Many of them didn't even get to go to secondary school. Like they had 3, 4 children. And I was still a teenager by the time I got into university. But these girls that were my age mates had kids, they were wives, they were mothers. And some never went to many didn't go to secondary school. After that thing we had in the community primary school, when we left, they stayed obviously, and they never went to school. It broke my heart. One of the girls, I won't say her surname, I will just use a different name. I won't say her real name. Let's call her Linda. We used to be very close when I was in primary 3, and she's beautiful. Jesus, that girl is beautiful. And she's still very beautiful and intelligent, but she never went to secondary school. By the time I went back to the village, she was a mom, and she was so shy to even like speak to me. I made her comfortable. We had a chat, but that picture that day broke my heart, actually. And I said, I don't know what, at that time, I didn't even know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And then in 100 level, I heard about the Emerging Nigerian Leaders Conference. I applied, I went. We were asked to set up like community projects and the rest of it. I thought of education, but then I was studying French and I was trying to align it to what I was studying. I came up with a project that didn't make sense. I can't even remember if I presented it or not in that program. The next year, another girl came forward and she had this focusing on children that were dropping out of school kind of program. And it was time to like merge in the group. Like I bought into her vision. Like immediately she made her presentation. It clicked. I bought into that vision. I knew that was exactly what I've been looking to do, but I couldn't put together. And immediately I picked it up and owned it like, it was mine. And we started off. Did not drop out thing, did a lot of projects, communities here and there, here and there. And at the end of the day, when that band or the initial group disbanded, we needed to like now look at, we were all in Ebonyi State, what was the issue? We needed to build an entity that will take care of the issue we were looking at. But here was the issue. I had lived in Ebonyi State all my life. I had experienced this thing. The rest of the team members had not lived, many of them had not lived in Ebonyi State. And those who have lived and those who have stayed, the little they had stayed, did not have first-hand experience of what I experienced. So there was always this, they felt I was like going too fast or not going too fast. We just never agreed on a lot of things. But what I did was I took charge, worked on project, developed projects, and reorganized everything and manned that team because I believe I knew what the issue was. When I cast my mind back, I remember what I saw. I knew what the issue was. I knew those that could change it. And that was how EDRI, I don't know if you remember EDRI, was born. And championed EDRI until I left EDRI in 2021. I had gone to my village and I was coming back from a work project I went to see. And at Achara Community Primary School, it was 9 a.m. and children were all over, outside the premises, all over the street. And I wondered, this is a school and they were meant to be in class, like in their classroom, they were meant to be learning. This is 9 o'clock in the morning. So why are they outside and what are they doing? Out of curiosity, I stopped and I began to chat with the children. What was happening? Some teachers were not there, some didn't have teachers. It was just like everybody to their own. Random chats with these children. What is your name? Say your name, spell your name. You see, we had teenagers, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 10-year-old, and it dawned on me, people in primary six, we actually 13, 14, some 15. And 2-letter word, 3-letter words, they couldn't spell, they couldn't say. And I knew right away there was a big problem. And then I reached out to Kenneth. I said to Ken, I want to do something, I don't know, but I need help. Ken said he had a friend, trying to remember her name, I can't remember her name at this instant. I went back and designed a survey to assess what the children knew, their literacy level, how we can come in and the rest of it. And we went through the questions, went through the survey, then went to the school, took permission, assessed the children, and boom, over 70% of them, primary 1 to 6, 2-letter words could not properly say them. They don't know them, they can't spell them, and they couldn't write them if they were given to them to do. And that was how we were stuck there. We started, going back every week. We went back, helped, and we realized like there were loads of them and we can't help everybody. We had to narrow it down to a class. That was how we started with primary 1. Starting with primary 1, we had 120 children in primary 1 squeezed into one classroom. And what we started ended up becoming what we have as a boy literacy project today. Now, one of the projects done by Wife for Red. And on the side, I've always thought of this, there's a group of people in our society, like when it ended up becoming an organization, when I now thought of it to be an organization. Beside education, there's a group of people I've always, I believe that they've always been neglected, at least in a Ebonyi State society. You see, we have this group of children in school. There are those who've gone to secondary and uni, but there's also a group of people that are now too old to go to primary school. They never went to primary school. They can't get into secondary school, but they are there and they are young. What do you do to them? How do you, because they're still the population. If we need the economy to thrive, we need to carry them along. And then were my focus when I thought of youth development. And I said to myself, these people, most of them are found in remote areas. They can't even say the word come in English. They know their languages, maybe pick 1 or 2 Central Igbo. Few of them understand Central Igbo. But the bulk of them in Ebonyi State just know their language. And I said to myself, they need to learn a trade. They need to learn a skill. And that was when we first started the skill development thing. And due to manpower, it was meant to be done online. And these are also people that don't have any digital skills. They
Mm.
don't have access to computers. How do you do this online? And then my friend came to me with an opportunity with Songhai Farm back then, trying to train people. And I was like, this is a good opportunity for these people. Many of them have their father's land. All they just need is fall into this training, get the funding to set up the farm. And
Yeah.
that project did not go through as I expected. But that was how I brought into the youth development arm into the program. Over the years, we've done like youth development project, learn skill for 1 or 2 persons, help them acquire this, acquire that. The most recent one was the boot camp from last year, where they were taught, help to develop their business plan and what have you. But due to, I still feel like that group, the group of people I had in mind when that aspect of the organization was developed, has not really been reached
Yeah.
by us. And because when you call for the kind of opportunities we get or funded opportunities we get for young people, they are not opportunities that they can relate with. They are not opportunities that they can get. They are not opportunities that are suitable for that group
Yeah.
of people. And after the boot camp last year, we paused that because we had to, as a team, re-examine why we even have that arm of the organization to start with. And it boiled down to
Yeah.
this group of people. And we
Yeah.
realized that the structure of the boot camp does not factor in this group of people. So we went back
I
to
get
the drawing board. Exactly. We went back to the drawing board and currently trying to develop something that will cater to the young people who do not have education and who do not have skill and who most times are neglected because they are neither in education nor in skill, but they need to be somewhere. If economies will develop, they need to be somewhere. If society will evolve, they need to be there. Learn a skill. From learning a skill or a trade, network. They don't need to speak English, but they need to understand the market. They need to understand the skills. They need to understand the evolving society. And that is how we are wired for it today. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I used to say something. I always say something that any society that neglects any fraction of its population, no matter how little, is doing itself a great disservice. It's like shooting yourself in the leg. No
Yeah,
matter how you want to see it, no matter what percentage of your population you think is doing well, if there's any number or any portion of that population that is not thriving, you're losing it. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. Let me talk
it's
like,
true.
you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Yeah, so it's good that you decided to factor in everybody. It's just like thinking about girls who got pregnant as teenagers, because everybody's trying to fight teenage pregnancy, early marriage, but most times we don't factor in girls who are pregnant already,
Yeah,
or who have children, because their situation is peculiar.
yeah,
They are not teenagers, adolescents without kids, and they are not adults, like full adults, maybe married people or what have you. So their condition is usually very dicey most
yeah,
times. Yeah. So, but thank you very much for the history, for the history and the story behind why for red. And I wanted you to talk about that story because it it's it's a good example that showcases the story behind, at least I know, a good number of NGOs in
yeah,
Nigeria. That's how most NGOs was founded. Was founded, yeah.
yeah,
So that's how most NGOs were founded, because somebody just wakes up and becomes uncomfortable about a certain thing, or he has a feels a certain degree of burden about a problem, and takes it upon himself or herself to do something about it. sometimes, most times, they don't even know what they are doing. They don't know how to go about it, but they just want to solve problems in their community. And I like the fact that you started with um some other organization, not even your own, and you were willing to put in your best, right? Until you realize maybe contradicting values and goals and vision,
Yeah.
right? So because most times everybody wants to start something new. Sometimes you don't really have to, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, start something completely new. You just need to find somebody that is already doing what you're passionate about and just join the organization, and and the goal is community
I
development.
agree with you on that because
Yeah.
I've worked with someone in Wife already that, I mean, very, like, very skilled, very knowledgeable as well, and could very well set up whatever like the person wanted to set up. But I remember what she once said to me, said, I can't say word to word, said it gives her the room to like contribute like in a very huge way without necessarily having to like start up
Bear the
her
weight
own thing.
and the burden and everything. Yeah.
And when we work together very well because it, one other gift that people or founders of NGOs don't value, I wouldn't say don't value or don't know that is a gift that they have, is ability to have team members that share in
Yeah.
your vision. If you have people who, and that was what happened to me when I first connected with the No Child Dropout thing, is that anybody who was around me at that time will think that like I was the primary owner of that. Like people thought I owned it because I actually owned it. Like I
Yeah.
took on the responsibility. I ran with it because I connected with it.
Yeah.
And it was something that happened with her when she, when she came to Wife for Red, felt like something was unlocked in her and like something she has always wanted to do. And she
Yeah.
connected with it and ran with it. And when
It's
you see people like this, the kind of output they give you, or if you're someone like this, the kind of output you create in such scenario, even you will be amazed and like, and I think
yeah.
that is where or what many people are preaching now because there's been like growing number of NGOs in Nigeria currently, number of NGOs, number of civil society organizations. And I mean, like you said, it's very beautiful to like find a challenge, an issue in the community and act on it. But also collaboration or trying to work like with an existing structure, is
Yeah.
also like a good way to go. So that I don't know, I just feel like it's a good way to go instead of starting from the scratch and struggling to build from the scratch. You can actually work with what is already in existence and bring in the energy, bring in the resources, bring in the ideas, and flow with that.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah, so that's on the conversation regarding the history of development as a third sector in Nigeria and globally. And we are very pleased that you stayed till the end of this conversation, and we hope it's been impactful. We hope you've learned one or two things, especially if you have interest in joining the sector, contributing, or if you're already here within the sector. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to us. And yeah, we'll see you some other time in the next episode. Bye for now.
bye.